everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Today, we are tackling a question that's sending ripples through the financial world. Is the mighty dollar, the one used for like 88% of international transactions, about to be knocked off its throne?
We've got some really interesting CNBC articles for this one.
Some seriously in-depth analysis from the London School of Economics.
And even the insights of a former Singaporean diplomat.
Wow.
I know, right?
That's quite the lineup.
It is. To help us unpack this whole thing.
It's definitely a fascinating time to be looking at the dollar.
Right.
That's for sure.
So before we jump into all the potential challengers.
And what a shift away from the dollar might even look like.
Okay.
Let's rewind a bit.
Help us understand why the dollar has been so dominant for so long.
Well, a lot of it goes back to World War II.
The U.S. came out of the war as a global superpower.
With a strong economy, so naturally their currency rose to prominence.
Backed by, stable and deep financial markets.
And then there's the whole petrodollar system.
Which basically means most oil-producing countries sell their oil in exchange for U.S. dollars.
This agreement really cemented the dollar's position in the world.
Ah, the petrodollar.
So when we see something like Saudi Arabia hinting at accepting other currencies for oil,
right,
which, by the way, is something we've seen recently,
yeah,
that's a pretty big deal, right?
It's huge.
For decades, the U.S. has benefited from what we call exorbitant privilege.
Okay.
Because the dollar is the world's reserve currency.
Essentially, this means they've enjoyed cheaper borrowing costs because countries around the world need dollars.
But this move by Saudi Arabia, it challenges that system.
It's like the first crack in the foundation.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
And it's not just Saudi Arabia.
Our sources suggest that the conflict in Ukraine and the way the U.S. froze Russian assets
have made a lot of countries nervous.
Yes. The weaponization of the dollar, using it as a tool of economic warfare by, for example, freezing assets, has definitely spooked some nations.
They're starting to worry, what if we don't play ball? Will the same thing happen to us?
And this former Singaporean minister we read about basically said that de-dollarization is the topic of conversation.
In political circles right now.
Interesting.
But is there really a contender out there?
Ready to replace the dollar? What are our options? There are definitely some currencies vying for the top spot.
The euro and the yen have been significant players for a while now.
Right, but they haven't exactly dethroned the dollar.
What's holding them back?
They both have their own sets of challenges.
The Eurozone, for instance, has faced economic and political hurdles.
That makes some countries hesitant to fully embrace the euro.
Okay, so maybe not them.
But what about this whole BRICS thing?
Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa talking about creating their own currency.
That sounds like a potential game changer.
It does, doesn't it?
And it's interesting to think about why they're so keen on this idea.
Part of it is about reducing their reliance on the West.
Especially when it comes to trade and finance.
They see a new currency as a way to challenge the existing global order.
So could it actually work?
Could we see a world where people are using a BRICS currency instead of dollars?
Launching a new global currency is a massive undertaking.
Think about the euro. It took decades of planning and coordination to get it off the ground.
It's not as simple as just announcing a new currency.
And expecting everyone to jump on board.
There are trade deficits and surpluses to consider with each country using its own national currency for bilateral trade deals.
And then there's the question of trust and stability.
For a global currency to work, people need to believe in it.
That makes sense.
It reminds me of that old saying, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Speaking of emerging economies, China's role in all of this is particularly interesting.
They're an economic powerhouse.
Yeah.
And they've been steadily increasing the use of the yuan in global trade.
Could this be their moment to step into the spotlight?
China is definitely a fascinating case.
While they've been taking steps to internationalize the yuan,
they haven't fully embraced the idea of it becoming the world's dominant currency.
Really? Why wouldn't they want that?
It seems like it would give them a lot of power and influence.
You're right, it would.
But with that power comes a lot of responsibility and potentially some unwanted scrutiny.
They might not want to inherit all the complexities that come with being the world's banker.
Plus, for the yuan to truly compete with the dollar, China would need to make some big changes to its financial system.
Like opening up its capital account, which they've been reluctant to do.
It's all about control, really.
Okay, so maybe China's playing the long game here.
But here's a fact that really blew my mind, even with their ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, which is all about expanding their global influence.
A lot of the financing they're providing is still done in, wait for it, U.S. dollars.
It's almost ironic.
It really highlights how deeply entrenched the dollar is in the global financial system.
Think of it like moving out of a house you've lived in for years.
It's messy. It takes a while to unpack.
And you're probably still going to be popping back every now and then for a forgotten book or a cup of sugar.
That's a great analogy.
Makes it feel less abstract.
And more, well, relatable.
Yeah.
But all this talk about currencies and global
It
finance,
feels very high level.
what does it all mean for the average person?
It's a great question.
And the truth is,
Even seemingly small shifts in the global financial system.
can have a ripple effect.
Okay, so give us an example.
How could this impact our everyday lives?
Well, let's say you're thinking about investing some money.
In a world where the dollar isn't the only game in town,
You might have a more diverse range of investment options.
each with its own risks and potential returns.
You wouldn't be limiting yourself to just dollar-denominated assets.
So a little bit of diversification could become even more important.
Exactly.
And it's not just investments.
Think about the price of everyday goods.
If countries are trading less in dollars, the exchange rates between currencies will play a bigger role.
In determining how much we pay for imported goods.
So that new gadget from, say, Japan,
Might suddenly become more expensive if the dollar isn't as strong.
it's a possibility. Yeah.
Or, on the other hand, goods from other countries could become more affordable if their currencies weaken relative to the dollar.
It's a complex web, but it highlights how interconnected we all are in this global market.
This is why I love these deep dives.
We started out talking about whether the dollar's reign is ending.
And now we're seeing how these big global shifts could actually hit our wallets.
But it's not all about potential downsides, right?
Right.
Are there any potential upsides to a world where the dollar isn't the only top dog?
Absolutely.
One potential upside is a more multipolar global economy.
Where power and influence are more evenly distributed.
This could create opportunities for developing countries and emerging economies.
To have a greater say on the world stage.
Interesting. So we're not just talking about different currencies being used.
We're talking about a potential shift in global power dynamics.
Right.
We're really at a crossroads, aren't we?
We are.
It's a bit like those old maps, you know.
With the "Here be dragons" written across the uncharted territories.
We can analyze the economic data,
We can study historical trends.
but there's still this element of mystery about how it's all going to play out.
I love that analogy.
A financial map with dragons guarding the unknown outcomes of a multipolar currency world.
So as we navigate this uncharted territory,
What's the one thing you think our listeners should keep in mind?
that's easy.
Imagine, for a moment, that you are an architect of a new global financial system.
What would be the core principles of your design?
Would it be built around a single dominant currency, or would you opt for a basket of currencies?
How would you ensure stability and fairness in a system with so many different players, each with their own interests and priorities?
Wow, those are some big questions.
They are.
But by grappling with these questions, by engaging in this thought experiment, we can better understand the complexities and possibilities of this evolving financial landscape.
I couldn't agree more. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the future of the dollar.
We've journeyed through economic history, explored potential challengers, and even dared to imagine a world where the financial map looks radically different.
A future full of dragons, perhaps.
Hey, maybe those dragons are just misunderstood innovators waiting in the wings. Either way, this is a topic that's far from over.
The decisions made today will have a ripple effect for years to come. So, until next time, keep those thinking caps on, and thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.